Alright, what's up guys? Today we're doing NMAP advanced port scans. Today I am actually excited because this is one of the best boxes I found that actually teaches you. Because they have a lot of boxes that teach you, I really think that, but most of it is very basic stuff. This actually teaches you some real world stuff, some that you can't really use anymore, but some good NMAP history as well. So I really like this box, and I think it's going to be beneficial to everybody that watched it. Even people that have been doing NMAP for years, they'll at least learn a little bit, and they'll at least learn maybe a little bit of history of NMAP as well. All right. So the introduction, you can read that. It's just telling you what we're going to learn. All right. So the first one, and these are common. So if you've ever done any NMAP scanning, you've probably heard of a lot of these. So here we're going to start with these three: the Null Scan, Fin Scan, and Xmas Scan. Now, before we get going, guys, I want to appreciate you guys a ton. We're almost at 200 subs. I really appreciate what you guys have been doing for me, helping me out a lot with the channel, giving me a lot of information in Discord as far as what you guys want to see, that type of thing. We're probably about 60% of the junior pen testing path done now, maybe 70. So we're getting close to the end, and I've really enjoyed it. So hopefully you guys have too, and hopefully we can get some more subs and we can keep this train rolling and find us another path after this, after the junior pen testing, that maybe we can try and teach as well, because I think cybersecurity is so important, especially nowadays. All right, so the Null Scan. Here it is. This is the syntax for it, SN. So I'm not going to read these word for word, but basically what a Null Scan does is it doesn't set any flags. So if you guys aren't familiar with what a flag is, this is a flag. See how it says here, reset ACK? That's a reset flag and an acknowledge flag coming back. So hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, you guys can go back to the basic NMAP scans and understand what that flag is a little bit. I have that channel or that video up. But basically, this sends nothing. Now, this is what you'd expect to see. It says, however, right here, if we expect the target server to respond with a reset packet if the port is closed. So what that means is, if the port's closed, it's going to send a reset, like reset that because that port's not open. We're not gonna accept information from you, right? So you can see here, it's we know that ports are open because we didn't get a reset flag. We didn't get anything, right? So here, port's closed, you're gonna get a reset and acknowledge. Okay? If it's not closed and you send nothing to it, it's not. Or I mean, if it's open, excuse me, you send nothing to it, it's not gonna send you that reset because it's looking for information. That's the difference. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. I kind of rambled there a little bit, but again, it's telling you NMAP requires root privileges. We already know that, guys. And by the way, guys, I know I say NMAP a lot, requires root privileges. You can run NMAP on Windows with ZenMap, so don't think that this is only Linux, but majority of people use it on Linux. So, okay, so the Fin Scan, pretty obvious. You're sending a Fin flag. So you can see here, it's an SF is the syntax. No response will be sent if the TCP port is open. So very similar to the reset flag. You're saying you want to finish the information flow, you'll get a reset and acknowledge. So if the port is closed, you get a reset. The reason for this is the port doesn't know any better, right? The computer is saying, nope, reset the connection, because you're saying, hey, I want to stop sending you information, and that port doesn't understand that you never sent it information in the first place. So it's actually going to say reset that connection, reset it, even though there is no connection, right? So here's something very important. Some firewalls will silently drop the traffic. So what that means is, a lot of firewalls, if they see this type of activity, they will actually reset the or they will actually drop the packet so you never get a response. That's important to know, because obviously if you get incorrect results and things like that. But one thing to remember, if you see a result like this, where it's only got 5 or 6 ports that are responding, they're probably open, okay? Or it's probably accurate, I'll say. If you see results where every single port is getting filtered or every single port is closed, that means it's probably being dropped by a firewall. So that's pretty much a pretty good rule of thumb. You'll notice very quickly if a firewall is blocking you or dropping packets or something, because you're going to get the same result for everything, right? Typically. All right, so the Christmas scan or Xmas scan, however you want to say it. So the reason they call it this, by the way, this is a little history for you guys. If you look at an Xmas scan in Wireshark or something like that, it kind of looks like a tree, and it's going to have 1 0 1 0. It's going to be almost every other, so it kind of looks like you're turning on a. Basically, if you had this set up like a Christmas tree, it'd be light on, light off, light on, light off. So it's just, it looks a little bit like a Christmas tree. A little bit of history, nothing important, but just kind of nice to know. All right, so the Xmas scan gets its name after the Christmas tree lights. Yep. So this sends fin, push, urge all at the same time. And again, here you're going to see if it's open, you get no response. SX is the syntax. And if it's closed, you get a reset and an acknowledge. Now, keep in mind, you want to know how these scans are going to react, how they're going to respond, because you can actually get a little bit more information from NMAP, and we're going to discuss that later. But if you get that information, you might be able to understand what's going on and whether the firewall is dropping it, or if you actually are getting the responses, but it's not reading right. Okay, so here it says here, this is the results from a Linux server. Similar to the null and the fin scan, which it really is. You're going to get the same results. It's just different firewalls and things will block different packets. Different ports are allowed different type of traffic. So you have to understand these other scans and what's happening. And it's just the changing of the flags. All right, and it says here one scenario where these 3 scans can be efficient is when scanning a target behind a stateless firewall. So, stateless firewall will check if the incoming packets have the SYN flag set to detect a connection attempt. So, all it's saying is your typical scan is going to try and make that Synack connection. That's usually going to be blocked by default. This will allow you, if it's not blocked by default, to get through that. Now, nowadays, cybersecurity is getting a little more advanced. People are understanding this, so this may not work in all scenarios, okay? So in a null scan, how many flags are set is the first question. Well, we know they don't set any flags. It's just a 0. In a fin scan, how many flags are set? Well, that's just 1 because they're sending just the fin flag. And in Xmas scan, we know it's a push, urge, and fin. So that's 3. So there we go. All right. So now it says start the VM. We got it. Use NMAP to launch a fin scan against the target or how many ports are open filtered. Okay. Well, we got to go up because it's not showing me the IP of the target, or the IP. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll just go to the fin scan here, and we'll say nmap sf, and then we'll get that IP, 1010 something. And we'll just see, hopefully it doesn't take very long, but we should see some ports open or filtered. Keep in mind also, if you see this result open filtered, okay, that's not always the result you're looking for an open for an open port. Sometimes you'll run scans, and we'll cover them here shortly. Sometimes you'll run scans that actually are closed, and that means they're open. And you'll understand that. So, and then it says launch a null scan against the target VM and how many ports are open. Okay, so we'll go back to that. I'm going to go through this scan real quick just because this scan is not used today. Typically, you can try it, but it's not going to typically give you results, so we'll cover it. So this is his name, Uriel Mayman. First described the scan 96. It's the FINAC. Basically, those are the bits that are set, and the target should send a reset. However, BSD-derived systems drop the packet if it's an open port exposing the open ports, okay? So what that means is BSD systems specifically would drop that packet he found. When he found that out, he knew that he can always scan them, and if you don't get the reset, that port's open. Typically, this does not exist anymore, so just heads up, this is the syntax for it. All right, so this is the syntax for it. It doesn't typically work anymore, but if you get an outdated system and something like that happens, you can actually look at it and see if it works, okay? All right, so we got this result. Scroll down, and you can see how many ports appear as open filtered. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Perfect. So now it's just wanting us to go ahead and do the exact same thing, but this time launch a null scan, which is fine. We'll just do the exact same thing, but we'll change this to null and see how many we get. And you can see NMAP actually does the reading of these results for you. So what I mean by that is NMAP is actually going through and saying, okay, I'm getting the result as, not getting a response. That means it's open. So that's what NMAP's doing for you. So keep that in mind. Okay, so TCP ACK scan. So this one actually is useful. I know the Mayman scan, I think they just did that for a little bit of history lesson. Yes, you might use it, but it's just one of those things to keep up there in case you ever run into it, you can use it, okay? So the TCP ACK scan is exactly as it says. You send an acknowledge, it'll send a reset, right? So here it'll tell us the SA is the syntax. The target should respond to the ACK with a reset regardless of the state of the port. Now, the reason this happens is because the ACK flag set should be set only in response, okay? So what that means is they would have sent you information first. You didn't get any information first. It knows that, so it's sending the reset. So a lot of you are probably wondering, well, why would I do that, right? Why would I don't care about that, because every time I send an ACK scan, it's literally just going to send me back a reset no matter what, so that doesn't make sense, right? But here's the key to it. This is for a firewall. So what that means is, so for those of you that don't understand how a firewall and a host work exactly, right? A host sits behind a firewall, okay? So keep that in mind. A host sits behind a firewall. What that means is, when a host is sitting behind a firewall, the firewall has rules, and in those rules it might say, hey, I need port 22 open, I need traffic allowed in, but only SSH traffic, okay? That's the type of rules that a firewall might set. So when that happens, I didn't realize we even got the results. When that happens, okay, it'll allow you through the firewall to the host, okay? So the key to this is, just because you're allowed through the firewall to the host doesn't mean that port on the host is opened. I could have just done the same thing, apparently. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So what that means is, if you get through the firewall, right, typically if you get firewall saying that, hey, this is open, whatever, typically that means that it's going to be open on the host as well, listening that port. But sometimes if a company has lazy admins, or they're overworked or something like that, they will leave the firewall rules in place and not update them. And if they're not updated, there might be a lot of ports open on a firewall that aren't open on a host anymore. So keep that in mind, that you're actually scanning for the firewall rules, not for the host here. All right. So here you can see, right here's what it looks like if you scanned a host before the firewall, or after the firewall. So let's say you're just scanning your own computer, right? This is what you'd get. Nothing, because they're all sending reset. Now, if you did it in front of the firewall, so you went, I'm scanning, here's the firewall, and then I'm scanning the target after the firewall, here's what you'd get. And you can see 22 unfiltered, 25 unfiltered, 80 unfiltered. Now, that doesn't mean that these are all necessarily up and working. What it means is you can get through the firewall with these using SSH traffic, SMTP traffic, and HTTP traffic. So keep that in mind, because this is very important, because if you are scanning something and you're just getting nothing, like the results you're getting are closed filtered, open filtered, whatever, every single time, this will actually show you what ports are allowed through the firewall. So that's a really good scan to know, especially since nowadays everything's behind a firewall. Okay, so the Windows scan, it's very similar to the TCP scan. It's actually the same exact not syntax, flags, okay, but it's got a different syntax. Now the difference is the way it reads it on the back end, the way it reads the results. The Windows scan actually uses the TCP window, hence the window. It's not for Windows, it's the window, the TCP window, and reads the results of that. Now, the TCP window is outside the scope of this. If you want to learn about it, you can look that up. It's not very complex, but it's just how they're reading the results, okay? So it's going to give you similar results. So you can see here, Almost the exact same thing. This is in front of the firewall. This is behind the firewall. So these are reading the firewall. Keep in mind. Now, it's just important to know that these two scans use the same flags, but they are different, okay? So don't think that just because you ran one, it's going to get the same results as the other. That's important. So now, custom scans. Custom scans are really important to understand because let's say you are noticing some stuff, you're getting a little bit of enumeration, you're understanding that, hey, this does this, whatever, to a host. You want to be able to run your own scans. So here's how you do it. You just use the tac scan flags, and then whatever flag you want, reset, syn, fin, whatever flag you want, right? So this is important because here he's using everything pretty much. Urge, act, push, reset, syn, fin. He's using all the flags. So that's great. That will give you results. Now the problem is you have to know what results to expect. So if it tells you you got this result, you have to know what is expected to understand the results, okay? So in a TCP window scan, how many flags are set? Just the one because it's the ACK and that was it. You decided to experiment with a custom TCP scan that has the reset flag set. What would you use after the scan flags? Well, that's just you're going to actually specify which flag, which is RST for reset. Okay, so now the VM received an update from its firewall. Okay, so we got to start this VM. So we got to terminate this one, start this one. That's fine. All right. Usually I'm pretty good about doing that at the beginning, but I didn't see it. So we'll wait for that to reload, and while we do that, we'll go to spoofing and decoys. So this is where you're getting into a little bit more complex stuff, but this is where if you have a team of people, you can really do some good stuff here. You can do it yourself too. It's just it'll be a lot of work. So in some network setups, you'll be able to scan target using a spoofed IP address. So I'm sure if you guys have ever looked at the man pages for NMAP, you've seen they have a spoof IP option. Okay, this is great. It's really good that you can spoof your IP. The problem is if you spoof your IP, right? Well, all the results are going to be sent to whatever IP you sent. So it thinks, so like here, source, comes from a spoofed IP, and then it's sent to that spoofed IP, right? So in their ARP tables, or wherever their DNS, their ARP, whatever they're getting the source from, or their IP from, they are going to send it to that host, not to you, okay? So now a lot of you are probably thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense then, because if I spoof my IP, it's going to go to this host, and then I just lose the results, right? Yes and no. So the results do go to this IP, but they're assuming when you do a spoofed IP attack like this, you're assuming that you can view that network traffic, meaning you either have some sort of control over the switch, or you might have a Wireshark listening. You might have a listener sitting here. Basically, somehow you have a way to listen to this traffic right here, the machine IP to the spoofed IP. That's important. You need that set up, or else you're going to just lose the packets and you're not going to gain any knowledge, right? So that's important about that. All right, so let's run these scans real quick while we're waiting. So it said here, launch the attack box. Once both are ready, open the terminal, use NMAP to launch an ACK scan against the target VM. All right, so we got to go up and get the IP. So we know the ACK scan is SA. So we'll go ahead here. And this is a new box, supposedly. So 41,130. All right. And we'll let that run. And you can see this is going to, again, only give us the results for the firewall. We don't actually know if those ports are open on the machine by this scan. All right. So, oh, dang, that was fast. Okay, so we got that back. So it says here, how many ports appear unfiltered? It looks like there's 4. So perfect, 4. Awesome. So what is the new port number that appeared from the old one? 443 is what it looks like. Boom. So if you guys don't know, 443 is just HTTPS. 8080 will be HTTPS as well. So sometimes you'll see different ports, but you notice it's guessing the service. So is there any service behind the newly discovered port? Yes, and that's HTTPS. It says no. Okay, which I guess they expect it to be no. Okay, let's see the hint on this. Okay, they want us to actually go to it and see if that service exists rather than does the results give us. So that's a good example, actually. Basically, like I said, this is the firewall rule, not the host. So when that happens, if we did go to that IP and went to 443, nothing's hosted there because that port is not actually being used by the host. Okay, so here we go. So the spoofed IP, you guys understand that you have to be able to capture these packets before they get here. Or the other option, theoretically, is if you had control of this spoofed IP. Let's say you already attacked a box and you have it and you're trying to maneuver to another box. Theoretically, you could send it to the box you have control over and capture the packets that way. All right, so that's how you do the spoof IP. And then here you can see you need to specify the network interface and disable the ping scan. All right, so this one's a little bit more useful. This is what you're going to see more often nowadays. So this is the decoy. So what this is, and they explain it pretty decent, but in layman's terms, it's very simple. You're going to spray scans at this machine, right? But what you're going to do is you're going to have, let's say you have 5 scans running at once, and they all come from different IPs, and then your IP is in there too, and it's going to think the source is all 5 of them. So it's not going to know who's actually sending the scan. And the reason that's important is because what happens typically when you get, if a SOC or an analyst notices that they're getting scanned, they don't even waste the time. They just block it. So when that happens, they got to block all 5 here, right? So if you start looking at a large number, they can't just block every IP out there, right? So they have to kind of either pick and choose, or they have to say, okay, let the scan go through and we'll see where the attack comes from. Or there's a lot of options they can do. They could block them all. I mean, it's definitely doable. So just keep in mind, that's what they're trying to do, is hide their actual IP address so they don't get blocked individually. Okay, so what do you need to do to add to the command sudo nmap to make the scan appear as if it's coming from the source IP address, a different source IP address, basically. So it's asking about the spoofed ID. So we just need to add the TAC S and then give it the new IP. All right, so now this one's a little bit different. It's asking about the actual decoys. So how do we do the decoys? So we just do TAC D and then add the decoys IPs in there. And that's pretty much it. And you can see here, you just separate them by a comma. Boom. All right, so that's spoofing and decoys. Pretty good information to have. The decoy is a little more useful unless you have some sort of access to the network already. All right, so fragmented packets. This is very important. You guys should definitely understand how this works, because not only does this work on NMAP, but a lot of attackers use fragmented packets to send attacks as well, because sometimes size is a determination for intrusion detection systems. All right, so now, firewall. If you guys don't know what a firewall is, I'm not going to explain it to you. You can read this. But a firewall just basically blocks traffic coming from the outside. Pretty simple. But you can set rules to allow certain traffic. So intrusion detection system. This is a little bit more intrusive, I guess, on a network. Basically, intrusion detection system, it can sit on an actual host or it can sit somewhere in the network. But it's looking for indicators of compromise. It's looking for something that is out of the norm, something that it doesn't normally see. And what it's going to do with that is it's actually going to say, okay, intrusion detection system, I noticed someone's scanning our network. Let's go ahead and alert somebody. That's what it does. It's different than an intrusion prevention system. Keep that in mind. There is a difference between an IDS and an IPS. Intrusion detection cannot prevent. What it will do is send an alert to you. So that's important to know the difference. So even though you might not get blocked, an intrusion detection system might alert somebody to what you're doing. All right, so here's the options for TAC F is a fragment packet. And it says here, once chosen, the IP data will be divided into 8 bytes or less. So it's going to divide it into 8 bytes up until the last byte or the last packet, which may be, whatever's left, maybe 4 or whatever. So adding another F will keep splitting it from 8 bytes to 16 bytes, and then so on and so forth. You can also use MTU to change the value yourself. But yeah, you should definitely use multiples of 8. So now, to understand packet fragmentation, I just had a stroke. Here's how it kind of works, right? So this is the header. This is the data that's going to be sent. Now the data will get fragmented, okay? So what happens here is these up here is information that's going to be sent initially. So in that, you're going to see the fragment offset. It's going to use this information, the fragment offset and the identification, and it's going to actually say, okay, fragment it here. Then when it gets to the end host, that end host is going to read the fragment offset and accept the packets in that offset standard and take it in and put it back together. All right, so I know that's a lot, but it's pretty simple. It's taking a lot amount of data and breaking it up and sending it one at a time. And this also stops the network traffic from just being completely cluttered and stops stuff like that. So networks slow down, things like that. So here it's saying let's compare the NMAP SS versus the NMAP fragmented SS. Okay, so this is stealth scan on port 80, pretty simple. And you can see they get a Synack reset. Pretty simple stealth scan, nothing to it. But here you notice they get a actual fragmented packet, Synack reset. So the actual information is fragmented out, and so you're going to see those extra packets, okay? Now, this can be important, especially if, like I said, if a certain scan or something does a certain size, you can change that size, and then it won't get blocked by default just based on size, okay? So here you got to do a little bit of math. It says if the TCP segment has a size of 64 and FF option is being used, I believe it's 4. Yep. So what that is FF is 16 bytes. So you're breaking them up into 16 bytes. Here, 64 divided by 16 is 4. All right. So this is something you're going to see in the wild as well. But it's something that is a little bit harder to perform nowadays with how much traffic is going on. So what this is pretty simple. So if you remember back here, we showed the IP ID. So you'll understand that here in a second. But basically, what you're doing is SI is the syntax, then the IP of the zombie, and then the IP of the host. So what's happening, okay, is initially you're going to send a Synack to the zombie IP. So keep in mind, whatever zombie you're going to use, so this would be something that's already on their network, okay? Whatever you're going to use has to be idle, meaning it can't be in use all the time. If it's in use, and when I say in use, I mean like a printer that maybe gets used once a day, that's idle, okay? Rather than if it's a printer that's being used all the time. Now, the reason for this is the IP ID. Let's say you send 1 packet today, okay? Let's say the IP ID now is 1 because you sent 1 off. You send another one, that's 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, right? So let's see that's how you're doing it, right? Now, obviously, it's going to be different, but that's the general concept. So you send the Synack to the zombie IP, okay? They send back the reset flag just like a normal, well, then the IP ID is in that packet. Your machine takes that IP ID, and let's say it's 5. They say, okay, you're on 5. Now they send a spoofed attack or a spoofed scan to the machine IP, okay, that they actually want to scan. And then because you spoofed it with the zombie's address, the information goes to that zombie. So the reset flag goes to that zombie. Now, if the port is open, right, because you sent a SYN flag to this, if the port's open, you don't get a reset flag, you get a Synack, okay, because they're trying to connect to you. But because it's spoofed, it's going to the zombie IP, not to you. Well, then the zombie IP will respond and say, okay, reset, right? So now you're thinking, okay, I didn't get any of that information. It went to the zombie, it went to the printer, right? But now you can send back to the zombie IP, you can send back this initial Synack, and that they'll send back the reset, and that IP ID, if the zombie sent anything out, if it sent anything to that machine IP, the IP ID will go up. It'll increment up. So if it was 5, now it's going to be 6, and then it's actually going to be 7 when it gets to you because they responded to you too. So you can take that and go, okay, here's how the whole thing works, right? So I check with zombie IP. They say, okay, I'm on IP ID number 5. I say, cool, you're on 5. I'll keep that in mind. Then I go to the machine IP and I say, hey, is port 80 open? They send the results to the zombie or to the printer. And then I check in with the printer. I say, hey, printer, what's your IP ID now? And it says, my IP ID now is 7. And you go, okay, well, that means they added one since talking to me last, which means port 80 had to be open because that means the zombie sent information to them. So we know it's open. Okay, so I know that sounds complicated, but it's actually a very intelligent way of checking to see if ports are open. Now, this is going to be a lot slower and a lot more complex, so you may not do 65,000 ports this way, but you could. So, all right. So here it says you discovered a rarely used network printer with the IP address, blah, blah, blah. You decided to use it as a zombie in your scan. Now, hopefully that makes sense to you guys. I hope I didn't throw you guys for a loop, right? All right. So here it's wanting us to do the SI. So SI and then the boom. Again, hopefully I didn't throw you guys too much for a loop. I know there's a lot of information there. So hopefully you understand that. You can read it as well, and it might make more sense to you that way. I just try to explain it in layman's terms for you guys. All right. So now getting more details. So this is just gathering more information is all it is. So here you can, it's the syntax tac reason. Okay, so you can see NMAP. This is the difference between the two. NMAP, here's your stealth scan, boom, here's your basic information. Now, if you do reason, you can see here, the first thing it says is host up here. Well, now it says host up, and the reason for it is received ARP response. Now, that might seem common sense to you that like, oh, that's good information, but that actually tells us another bit of information. It tells us we're on the same LAN as that as well. So that's also good information if you didn't already know that. Now, one you see a lot more common is you're going to see this verbosity or verbose. So you can use TAC-V, TAC-VV for more verbosity, and you're going to get a lot more information like this. But keep in mind that you're also going to be louder on their network. So they may start seeing more traffic. So now, and it says here, if VV doesn't satisfy your curiosity, you can use D for debugging details or DD for more debugging details. Now, the important thing here is that you know how to do this, but it's also to understand the reason won't add any more network traffic for them because it's just telling you why they came to these conclusions. The verbosity will, because you're asking for more information. You're not just getting more information, you're asking for it. Same thing with debugging. You're going to ask for more information. All right, so now it's asking us to go ahead and run this scan, and this is going to give us the reason for it. At least they are running a fast scan, so. And I know this, what I mess up. Oh, I put in the wrong, it's S, capital S. Hopefully you guys are understanding that. I know it's a lot of information this time, but this is good information in my opinion. This is one of the more advanced scans, right? But you're also going to use these a lot more. So understanding how you can change the scans is very important. All right, so what is the reason provided for the stated ports being open? And it shows you here, the Synack is the reason. So what that means is it sent them a SYN flag, and they sent back a Synack on all those ports, meaning that it's probably up and working. All right, guys, so we covered a lot here. This is the summary, and that's just some of the syntaxes. But we covered a lot. I think it was very good information. I'm hoping you guys understood a lot of it. I know sometimes the way I understand it isn't necessarily the way someone else understands it. So it's hard to get that across to a way that everybody can understand it. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. If you guys did like it, go ahead and hit the sub button. If you guys enjoy this series, keep following it. We're going to keep grinding on it, and hit that like button as well, guys. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we can reach 500 subs is the next goal. Hopefully we can reach that and keep growing and keep going, and hopefully start, as we get past these junior pen testing, start maybe diving into deeper stuff or covering real world attacks more often. So hopefully you guys like it, and I appreciate you guys. Thanks.